Before listen, lock your door.
Subscribe for daily horror story.
First story.
I was alone when it happened. Not the smart kind of alone. Not the ignorantted on it kind of alone. I was stupid alone, solo hiking a stretch of southern Appalachia. I didn't know nearly as well as I thought I did. This was 2 autumns ago. I had a few free days between jobs and decided to tackle a remote loop trail near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. I'd read about it online, barely used, hard to find, but supposedly worth it. The kind of place with no cell signal, no people, and views untouched by time. That was exactly what I wanted. What I didn't know was that part of the trail curved into an area the locals called Lost Man's Hollow. I didn't even notice when I crossed into it. There were no signs, nothing obvious. But I remember when the woods changed. At first, everything was normal. Crispy leaves, a cool wind, that golden light you only get in October. I felt good, peaceful. I walked maybe 7 miles in before I noticed it. Silence, not just quiet, but a dead silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl without you knowing why. No birds, no bugs, no wind, just ... nothing. I stopped walking and realized I couldn't hear my own footsteps. I looked down. My boots were still moving through the leaves, but there was no sound. It was like the air had swallowed everything. I stood there, confused, trying to rationalize it. Maybe the wind had died, or the trees were blocking noise, or something. But it wasn't just my ears. My whole body felt wrong, like the ground was buzzing, like something was watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. I should have turned back. Every instinct in me said to leave, but I kept going, trying to act like I wasn't scared. About an hour later, I came across a clearing. An old house sat at the center, half collapsed, eaten by vines, windows black as holes. I wasn't looking for a shelter. I wasn't even tired, but I walked toward it like I was being pulled. The structure was small, maybe a cabin once, with rotting wood siding and a collapsed front porch. A rusted horseshoe was still nailed above what used to be the door. I stepped inside. The air was colder in there, heavy. The floor creaked in slow protest as I moved around. Old furniture, shattered glass, bits of bone, possibly animal, were scattered across the floor. One corner was blackened with fire damage. Another wall had deep claw marks, not from a bear. I was starting to feel dizzy, like the room was tilting just slightly when I heard the sound. It came from the back room, a voice, low, croaking, like someone with lungs full of water trying to speak. It said my name, not a guess, not something similar. My actual full name, said clearly, Matthew ... I froze. Then it said it again. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I don't even know if my heart was beating. The voice sounded close, like just beyond the wall, but I hadn't told anyone where I was going. No one even knew I'd gone hiking. I backed out of the house slowly, not taking my eyes off the doorway to that back room. As soon as I cleared the porch, I turned and ran. I didn't stop for miles. No trail, no map, just pure animal panic. Eventually, I reached a dry creek bed and followed it until night fell. I set up camp in a hollow between 2 ridges, too exhausted to keep moving. I didn't build a fire, didn't eat. I just curled up in my sleeping bag, shaking that night. Something circled my tent. I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving around me in the leaves. Every few minutes it would stop, then start again. At one point, I heard breathing. Not a bear, not a coyote. Human, wet, rattling, wrong. It stayed out there all night. I didn't sleep by dawn. It was gone. I packed up and started walking again. But nothing looked familiar. The landscape felt twisted, like someone had taken the forest and rearranged it just slightly. My compass spun slowly, useless. Every ridge looked the same. Every tree felt like it was watching. I walked for hours until I found an old trail marker, nailed to a tree. The wood was grey, unreadable, except for a faint symbol I didn't recognize. A circle with jagged lines across it, like a broken eye. Below it, carved into the bark, were the words, "You came too far." I tried to retrace my steps, but the more I walked, the more turned round I became. The air got heavier again, and then I started hearing things. Whispers, not words, just murmurs and laughter. Children's laughter echoing through the trees, where no children should be. I kept moving. I didn't stop until I saw the clearing again. The house, same rotting porch, same claw marks, same smell of wet ash and old wood. I hadn't been walking in circles. The place had moved. It was following me. I turned and ran again, not even trying to be quiet now. I think I lost hours in those woods, maybe longer. I don't remember stopping. I just remember collapsing when I hit a dirt road and seeing headlights. A trucker found me, said I was lucky, said hikers go missing up here all the time, said nobody usually finds them. He drove me to the nearest ranger station. I told them what happened, not everything, just that I got lost and maybe dehydrated. They nodded, didn't seem surprised. Later, one of the rangers pulled me aside and asked where I'd been. I told him about the house. His face went pale. "You don't go near Lost Man's Hollow," he said. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Because it calls things. And once they know your name, they don't forget." It's been over a year now. I haven't been back, but I still hear that voice sometimes. In dreams, on bad nights, right before I fall asleep, saying my name, warning. Next time you see an old cabin in the middle of the woods, don't step inside, no matter how quiet it seems.
Second story.
I always thought the forest was a kind of sanctuary somewhere. You could step out of the noise of life and hear yourself think again. That's why I kept going back. Year after year, ever since college, I'd spend a few days hiking off trail, through the Appalachian backwoods. I liked the quiet, the damp earth under my boots, the way the trees swallowed sound. I'd always bring a journal, some instant coffee, and enough supplies for 5 days. I never brought music. I didn't want to drown out the silence. Last fall, I planned a trip through a lesser-known ravine in western North Carolina. I'd read about it in a hiker's forum, Pine Hollow. Not even an official part of the trail system. Just a name passed around by folks who liked the deep woods. Supposedly, it was remote, untouched, and practically invisible if you didn't know where to look. That's what drew me to it. I parked my car at an old service road and started hiking by noon. The forest was beautiful, towering pines, thick moss, and the faint sound of water echoing through the trees. I made it to the entrance of the ravine by dusk. It was deeper than I'd imagined, like a scar in the mountain. I descended carefully, following a game trail that twisted between rocks and brush, and finally found a level patch of ground beside a small creek. I set up camp, got a fire going, and boiled some water for my freeze-dried dinner. That first night was uneventful. Cold, quiet, peaceful. But the next evening, something changed. I had just finished eating when I noticed a light moving in the trees. It was faint, cello-ish, flickering, like an old lantern swaying in someone's hand. I turned off my headlamp and stared. The light was maybe 50 yards away, half hidden behind the tree trunks. I assumed it was another hiker. Maybe someone who had wandered off course. I called out, "Hey, you okay?" But there was no response. The light paused, then turned, then slowly vanished into the trees. I didn't think too much of it at the time. Maybe they didn't hear me. Maybe they didn't want to talk. Maybe it was nothing. But the next night, the lantern came back. This time, I saw it closer. It was moving along the creek, steady and deliberate, not swaying like someone walking normally. And again, no sound, no footsteps, just the yellow glow shifting between tree trunks. I called out, again louder this time. Nothing, just that strange, slow movement until the light disappeared behind a ridge. I felt a tightness in my chest that I couldn't explain. I told myself it had to be another camper. I wasn't far from national forest land. People wander, people get lost. But why didn't they say anything? I slept badly that night. Every creak of the trees sounded like footsteps. At one point, I thought I heard whispering, but it might have just been the wind through the rocks. The third day, I debated leaving. But I had planned 5 days, and I hated the idea of cutting it short because of my nerves. I hiked a few miles upstream, away from the campsite, hoping to get my mind off it. The day was cloudy, quiet, strangely still. Even the birds seemed to avoid Pine Hollow. I didn't see a single squirrel or deer the entire hike. When I got back, I found something waiting by my tent, a stone. Not just any rock, this one was flat, about the size of a dinner plate, and someone had carved a spiral into it. A perfect, deep spiral etched into the surface, worn smooth like it had been polished for years. I didn't touch it. There was no one around. No voices. No sounds. The air felt heavy, like something was pressing down on the entire ravine. I stood there for a full minute before finally packing up my gear and moving camp half a mile away. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept the fire going until dawn, shotgun in my lap, eyes flicking at every shadow. The lantern came back one more time. It didn't stay at the tree line this time. It moved in slow arcs across the clearing, like it was looking for something or someone. There was no figure holding it, just the light, floating, gliding inches above the ground. I didn't shout, I didn't move. I just watched, heart pounding in my ears, as the lantern hovered near the creek, paused, and then slowly turned toward my new camp. It stopped, then. It blinked out, not dimmed, not faded, just gone. I left before sunrise. I didn't eat, didn't clean up. I hiked out of the ravine without stopping, following the GPS line back to my car. Once I hit pavement again, I sat in my car for almost an hour before I could bring myself to drive. Later, I tried to find out more about Pine Hollow, but the thread on the hikers forum was gone. The users who had mentioned it hadn't posted. In years, I found one old blog that mentioned the ravine being avoided by locals, with a single line that stuck with me. Things that walk in the mountains at night and are hard to explain don't want you to explain them. They want you to leave. I haven't been back since, but sometimes, at night, I see a yellow flicker on the edge of my backyard woods. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks, but maybe not. Next time, You see a lantern.
Third story.
When I first started working with the National Forest Service, I thought I'd seen the worst of what the Appalachian backcountry could offer sudden storms. Lost hikers, the occasional aggressive bear, but nothing ever prepared me for what happened during the second to last week of my final season out there. My assignment was simple: spend 5 days solo at an old fire lookout tower slated for demolition, document the structural decay, and make sure no squatters had taken up residence. The tower sat on the edge of a little-known ridge trail about 15 miles from the closest access road. No cell service, no backup, just me, the tower, and the trees. It wasn't my first solo post, and I didn't mind the isolation. In fact, I liked it. Most people who work the fire watch learn to make peace with silence. It sharpens your thoughts, makes everything clearer. But that week, the silence felt like it was watching me. The tower itself was old, maybe 60 or 70 years, and narrow. Wooden box raised 30 feet off the ground with a 360-degree view of the surrounding forest. I arrived around midday, climbed the groaning steps, and stepped into the cabin. The floor creaked, and everything smelled like dust and pine tar. A rusted cot, some broken radio equipment, and a dusty binder of old logs were all that remained. The first night was uneventful. I made dinner on a camp stove, reviewed some documents, and watched the sun bleed out behind the hills. The view was breathtaking until the stars came out and the forest turned into a black sea. That's when I first noticed it, far off. Across the valley, maybe a mile away, I saw a light flickering through the trees. Not the bobbing glow of a headlamp, and not a campfire either. It was small, steady, and orange, like an old lantern. I figured it was another hiker or a hunter breaking regulations, but it never moved. Just sat there between the trees. The next night, the light was closer. Still off trail, maybe half a mile now, but still unmoving. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it had to be someone's strange choice of gear, or maybe a trick of distance and elevation. I didn't mention it in my daily report, but on the third night, things changed. I'd just finished eating when I heard something on the stairs. 3 slow steps, then nothing. I froze. There was no wind, no rain, no animals that big in the area. I grabbed my flashlight, opened the cabin door, and pointed the beam down the stairs. Empty. I scanned the surrounding trees. Nothing. But when I turned back to the cabin, I saw something that chilled my blood. The binder on the desk, the one full of old fire logs, was open. I hadn't touched it. I walked over slowly and looked down. The page was dated October 19th, 1972. The entry was, "Brief, lights in the trees again." Closer this time. Still no voices. Just movement. I think they're watching the tower. I flipped through more pages. Most were routine, weather, fire risk, wildlife sightings. But every now and then, just once or twice a year, there were entries about lights. Always the same description. Steady, orange glow, unmoving. And then, later, the entries would stop completely. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, flashlight in hand. Around 2 a.m., I started hearing what sounded like breathing. Not close, but below me. Slow, ragged breaths. Then the sound of movement, like someone walking in slow, deliberate circles around the base of the tower. I didn't go out. I didn't want to know what it was. At sunrise, everything was normal again. No footprints, no broken branches, Just the woods, still and damp, pretending nothing had happened. I thought about hiking out early, but I'd only had one more night to go, and part of me didn't want to admit I was scared. That was a mistake. The final night, the wind picked up. The tower groaned in the dark, and I could feel every gust through the boards. I tried to read, to distract myself, but every few minutes I'd look up and check the trees. Then, at exactly 11:47 p.m., the light came back. But this time, it wasn't in the trees, it was on the stairs. I heard each step creak under invisible weight, slow, deliberate. I backed into the far corner of the cabin, heart pounding. There was no sound except the wind and the creaking wood, and then silence. I waited, flashlight pointed at the door. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I didn't dare move. Then, without warning, the radio on the old desk crackled. It was broken, disconnected from the battery pack, but it let out a long, low, static noise. Then a voice, not clear, not human, just one word, whispered like a threat. Stay. Then silence again. At dawn, I left. I didn't pack properly. I didn't file the last report. I just climbed down, walked 12 miles in near shock, and drove until I was out of the mountains. When I submitted my logs, I left out that final night, but something told me I wasn't the first. I started reading old personnel files, going back decades. There were gaps in the record people who'd done short stints at the tower and never came back. Some resigned, some just vanished. One man reportedly died of a fall, but the file only said no body recovered. I think the lights in those woods aren't just lights. I think something lives out there, and the tower is their perch, a place they circle, a place they whisper through, now. Sometimes, late at night in my apartment in Asheville, I'll be half asleep and swear I hear a step. Just one, outside my window, and sometimes I dream of that tower, again standing in the middle of nowhere, still watching, still waiting. Next time, you're assigned to a lonely watch post in the woods. Don't go alone.